I don't want there to be a sexual situation between me and this person.
Yeah.
But can I acknowledge that this woman is sexually attractive?
How do you get to like 30 plus years and no one's gone, dude, you sound like a dick? Like, that is crazy.
Wow. Okay. I've never had to consider that.
Yeah.
Until this very moment that you just said that, right? Literally all men would never really stop to think about that. There's very few things I hear to me that are brand new, but that, well, if you're a woman, why are you interested in men, right?
I don't know. Sorry. It's though, sometimes I'm like, you know what you're doing and you're enjoying the fact that I'm uncomfortable.
For anyone listening to this right now, what do you want to see change about the whole situation in an ideal scenario moving forward?
That's such a difficult question.
I have names for people in my head, and then I have names for people outside. Yeah. Okay. And I never tell people what their names are in my head.
Yeah, I can understand why.
But they're never bad ones. They're quite endearing. Okay. I'll mention a friend of mine, and she probably won't mind if she don't even hear this, but her name is Pandora. In my head, I call her Panda Bear.
See, that's sweet. That's not where my mind went. When you said you have names for people, I was thinking a lot of
I'm not just going to call her Panda Bear, like if we're just having a conversation. Or sometimes if I message her, I'll call her P Bear.
Cute.
Yeah, and it's just a term of endearment. But it's awkward and out of context in an actual conversation when you're just trying to have a normal discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're in my head more Jimmy than Jim.
I can be Jimmy, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm Jimbo a lot at the minute. Jimbo the Bimbo a lot in like a lot of spaces. But Jimmy is like the OG. Jimmy's like
fair. Well, I'm definitely not resident. I definitely didn't get you to come on here because you're Jimbo the Bimbo. It's actually your intellect that I'm after. That would have been weird. Like, this is a great conversation. We're really getting to the heart of it.
I can be an intellectual bimbo if they exist. I don't
know. All right. So to the point of why I've asked you here.
We're getting into it. Okay, I'm ready.
So one of the things that during my time, not only just as a personal trainer working in gyms, but just as a person, and especially as a bloke, I've gone through life and I've been able to observe the way men and women interact with each other. And for generations historically, there was a very accepted way for men to conduct themselves. And maybe in the last, let's say 20 years, there's been a little bit more of a voice from women to say, actually, we've got some issues with the way you're conducting yourself with us. That is an observation I've also been able to make. So how men approach women.
Yeah. I'm so scared. This is like, I feel like we're peeling back the cat and it's like all the little worms are like, here we go.
How men approach women, in particular in a gym setting. Another one came to mind. Public transport is another one, and I have a story about that which we'll get to later. But at times we have learned that the way men approach women can sometimes be inappropriate.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned public transport, because it's not like, I was thinking about in a gym context, and then I was like, but it is just everywhere. Like, it is like something that's, everywhere. But in a gym context, it can be very inappropriate.
So you have definitely made a lot of noise around this, from what I've seen.
Yes, so maybe.
Can we
Me make noise? Never.
Can we kind of get some idea of what is considered inappropriate conduct in a gym setting, in a public transport setting, in any setting?
Yeah, we can try. The thing is, from the get-go, you're going to have... So for me, I find it starts with staring. Like staring, there's a difference between appreciating that someone, you know, looks nice and whatever, and then carrying on the other day. But when like, you're like aggressively, clearly watching someone, and I say that because in the gym as well, people are very much in their own insular space. I would say that's like the beginning of it. And that escalates all the way up to like, one time I was squatting. It's not funny, I don't really know why I laughed. But I was squatting and I was literally like, my bum was on the ground. Like, bar on my back, bum on the ground. And this guy comes up behind me and starts spotting me. I didn't ask for it.
I didn't. So please, wait, hold on. When you say spotting you, what exactly did he do?
Like came up behind me and like pressed himself against me to help me stand back up squatting.
Where were his hands?
Like on my waist.
Really?
But like, and I think because I immediately like racked the bar and was like, what the fuck are you doing? And he, sorry, I just, I immediately racked the bar and I was like, what the fuck are you doing? And he was like, I'm just helping. You look like you need your help. And I was like, but I didn't ask for help. And I certainly didn't say you could put your body like on my body like that. So like that's like a really extreme thing, but I genuinely don't think he thought he was doing anything wrong.
Did you ever notice that this individual, have you ever noticed them before?
I'd never seen them before, no.
The first time you've ever seen them? Fair enough.
And also it was only like 40 kg, so I was a little bit insulted. Like I was a little bit like, I'm not even squatting body weight. Can you... Like, if it was heavier, then maybe I'd understand it a tiny bit more.
Not only are you inappropriate, but you're also
you're
mugging
also
me off.
Weak.
Yeah. I got that. This is double.
Double-edged sword.
So yeah, that's the staring thing is very interesting. Because so I'm observing the environment around me, and the staring thing actually ties into the public transport thing. And so I'm on I'm going on this trip with this guy. He's a client of mine, and to be fair, you know, we are friends. And I know there's a lot of stuff that I have spent time trying to correct him on. He's a much older guy than me, and he's a nice enough guy, and sometimes I just don't know whether he's like blissfully unaware or like, you know, just being crafty. And so we're sitting there and we're on the Elizabeth line on our way to, I think, Heathrow or wherever.
Which I love, by the way. It's like my favourite line, just putting it out there.
And he looks up and he sees this, like, you know, you got all the adverts, he sees this sign and he's like, he looks at me and goes, what does that mean? And I was like, what? And I looked up and he goes, yeah, it's like, yeah, it's inappropriate to stare at people. So what does that mean anyway? Like something, it was something to do with like sexually staring or something. He goes, how do you sexually stare at someone? And I was like, I'm not going to mention his name, but I was like, man, do you not get how staring at someone would make them feel uncomfortable, in particular a woman on public transport that you don't know? And he goes, I don't see the problem. I don't see the problem with what we can't look at each other now. And I was like, there's a difference between looking at each other and leering at someone, right? And he just packed train carriage. He now gets into this full-on debate with me. Right?
But that's why I hesitated, because I was thinking of that sign. I remember that campaign from TfL, and I remember overhearing people disagree with the sign, having conversations with people. Like, I remember a lot of people talking about that and being like, how can you say that we're not allowed to stare? And also, like, looking the way I look and traveling South America, I got stared at a lot. So I went from being very much like, don't stare at me, to then being challenged on that, because I was like, well, I kind of understand why they're staring, because they don't see as many women that look like me in the same way, so they're not meaning it to be rude. But then I got back to England and I was like, stop staring at me. Like, it's such a...
It is...
tricky...
It is tricky, because it's hard to discern between someone who's maybe being ill intentful and someone who's just like just got caught in that moment,
Yeah.
and their brain's kind of just, I don't know what to do, so I'm just gonna look.
Yeah.
And I've definitely observed that when I do catch people staring, because here's the first thing I do, right? As soon as an attractive woman appears,
Look down.
the first thing I do is I look around at all of the guys.
Yeah, it's like if you're ever at a wedding and you look at the groom instead of the bride. Oh, wholesome. Anyway, this is not as wholesome as that.
This is
yes.
not wholesome.
Look at the guys.
You'll look around and you'll see every single guy is now doing this gawping thing, right? And they don't know that they're not aware that I'm like looking at them, but I always do it because I'm like, I guarantee you I know what's going to happen. As soon as I see that person walk around, they've ceased all of their activity, they've turned their head.
But also, like, I think a lot of men just think we don't know. Like, I don't know. It really confuses me. It's the same. Like, if I wear a low-cut top, like, I can't hide the fact that I have, big boobs. And then people think that they think I don't see it, or they think I do, and they don't care that I know. I don't know.
Why do you think that is?
Women are raised, and we have to be aware of things literally for our lives.
Right.
And men don't have that set. There are factors that can make men feel uncomfortable, but not in the same way, I would argue.
I think you're probably right. So where I was going with that was most of the guys that I see staring, and you're right, they're not aware. They're not even aware of me seeing them stare.
Yeah.
And it's because no one ever calls you out on it.
Yeah.
Right? You can stare, and here's what happens if you do get caught staring by another guy. It's not judgment.
It's agreement.
It's agreement and cooperation. It's this sort of cosign of, right? Yeah. And so now this bonding situation is occurring between the guys. And that's unfortunately like compounding the negative effect, because now the environment just went from, oh, there's one guy staring at me, to, okay, I'm surrounded.
Yeah. Well, that literally happened to me yesterday. I went with two of my girlfriends to drum codes, and that exact situation happened, and we were dancing and we looked around and we were like, we're literally circled by men. And they were all like in agreement of the same thing. And then when you challenge it, they're like shocked, and you're like, what? I've given you no indication that this is okay. It's strange.
So you've kind of made an interesting point, because you said, I've given you no indication that this is okay. With men, I've never received any education around it. You're never taught about social signaling, and you're certainly never taught about signaling from the opposite sex or the same sex. That's probably a different conversation, and actually I might get into that a little bit later, because I have some reservations with that too. The biggest question most guys, like young guys getting older, and even older guys, it's like, how do I know a woman likes me, right, or a girl likes me?
Yeah.
And so you spend a lot of time trying to figure that out, and guys will have conversations around this, and some guys will like do the whole confidence thing and pretend like they know, but nobody really seems to fully gauge or understand that.
Okay.
I'm 37, I'm going to be 38 this year. I'm just about starting to understand how women show interest, and not because I learned how women show interest, it's just because I've started to learn people better in general.
Okay.
So I was starting to understand how people show interest with each other, and what the underlying factors of interest might be. So how we make surface level judgments, what our own needs are. So if whether I'm an emotionally available person, whether I'm emotionally unavailable, am I looking for short term, am I looking for long term? And then that seems to have a big impact on what signals we pay attention to and what signals we don't pay attention to.
Yeah.
So this idea that, one of the most common things I see spoken about in gyms is the rules are different depending on whether a girl likes you or doesn't like you, right? So if she finds you attractive, all of your approaches and advances and all of that is perfectly okay. But if she doesn't find you attractive, it's a HR issue.
Yeah.
What do you say to guys?
That is such a minefield. Because I've had the same conversations with like my followers when I've talked about things like this on, you know, my social platforms. And I used to be very much of the opinion like the gym is like, when I go to the gym, I'm just, you know, for me, don't speak to me at all. But have also fallen into that trap of like, that is a pretty person and I would like to speak to them, or if they spoke to me, I'd definitely talk back. I think the main difference is obviously just consent. And like we were saying, like, if a person is showing interest back, there's going to be like eye contact, there's going to be a smile, there's going to be... I don't know. I don't know that there's no one answer, and I know that's not helpful. But like, I feel like they're a big... Like, it's funny to me that you say men are never taught to understand how women show interest, because I feel like all women are taught to do is gain male interest. Mm-hmm. So it's mad to me that you're saying men don't know, because like everything as a teenager, everything was about getting a man's interest.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, again, I've never had to consider that until this very moment that you just said that, right? And I now can sort of make a massive assumption that literally all men would never really stop to think about that. Like that, there's very few things I hear to me that are brand new. Yeah. But that is, and it's not like it's brand new, but it's brand new in terms of it's at the front of my mind to be like, oh wow, yeah. We don't look at women thinking that they are driven by that. Yeah.
But that's why we're getting this surge of women being as outspoken as they are being, because that realization that you just went through, like I had to go through, and I went through at like 19, where I was like, I've been conditioned my whole life is to be seen as attractive by men. And so a lot of women are going through that now. And so where am I going with this point? That like that's everyone goes through that, because that's the way society is designed, right?
I mean, if I try and unpack it right now,
it's huge, by the way.
I would say, because I just assume, I don't look at things as gender different. I just assume that my personal experience of life and the journey that I'm going on, everybody else would be in a similar boat, where it's not a case of so like there's probably the same is true on men's side, right? Is we're taught that we need to be providers, we need to be strong, we need to take charge of situations, we need to be leaders, and a lot of that is driven by basically making yourself a very viable mate for the opposite sex. So we're also kind of conditioned to be like, right, this is what it is to be a man, and one of the ways you can understand that you're doing well at that is that a number of women will show you interest and be attracted to you, and you will have access to a higher number of women as a result. Admittedly, there are a lot of men that don't get much interest from women at all. And there's this sort of uneven shift between how many women are showing interest versus how many men are showing interest. So if you took 10 guys and 10 girls, you could almost argue that all 10 of the girls, somebody's going to look to approach them at some point in time. There might be one that, due to their own sense of like low self-worth, doesn't recognize when somebody is showing them interest. But you can easily be 5 of those guys and no one really shows you interest at all, and you end up misreading signals, i.e. there's women in your life but they think you're a nice person, and so they're like, oh, I'll be friends with this guy. This guy doesn't know the difference between a friendship signal and a sexual interest or romantic interest signal, and so therefore misinterprets it quite often. Both sides apparently thinking that I need to be something for the other side. I've always felt like I sat in the middle, right? So I'm just like, I was never good at reading interest from women at all. And I never fully understood men being as interested in women as they were. Because it was very sort of empty.
Yeah.
It's like, what is it that you want from the other person? And kind of going back to what you said is actually what I figured out was people wanted validation.
Yeah, and I think there's this male, and I think this is where the staring in the gym or my annoyance in the gym comes in, is that there's this sexualization of everything women do. So like you said yourself, those 10 women, you can almost guarantee someone will show interest, because there is this hyper sexualized approach to anything women do, whereas we don't have that same attitude to men as much in society. And so in the gym, I can guarantee 7-8 times out of 10, if I'm doing hip thrusts, someone will make a comment. Someone will make some kind of just joke about the nature, the movement of what's happening, which is not something that the men that I know that train would experience. So like, where was I going with this? I think it's such a hard line, and I think that's why it feels so disappointing as a woman when you have a friend or you have a gym buddy or something and you see it as that, and then it becomes this like sexualized thing.
Yeah, that's a very interesting. There's so many guys living in the quote unquote friend zone, right?
But I don't think the friend zone exists.
Here's why I explain yourself.
She just said no. She just didn't want to sleep with you. You're just a friend. It's not a friend zone.
Here's the thing, though. The no never happened because the proposition never happened, and so there's this perpetual mystery surrounding the relationship. But
I'd be willing to put money on most of the time there's no mystery for the woman.
100% of the time. It's not even most of the time. It's 100% of the time, and the guy knows it as well. But again, if the premise of all of this is validation, I don't want to deal with being invalidated, and actually just getting some interaction from you is validating me enough to kind of keep me going. Now, to me, it's illogical. And because I'm able to work in the realms of logic, it's easier for me to kind of be like, okay, this person's interested or not interested. And then if they're not interested, am I interested in them as a friend? If I'm not interested in them as a friend, then I don't need to be like interacting with them. The guys that continue to there is someone we know.
Are we gonna name and shame?
We're not gonna name and shame because this person is actually a friend of mine, and so I'm not gonna put him on blast like that.
I'm scared to realize who it is. Okay, go on.
I remember at the time I was sitting in for the context of the audience, me and Jimmy worked at a gym probably like about 5-6 years ago now, and it wasn't for very long, but yeah, that's how we know each other. And so some of the people that worked with us at the time are obviously people that we have in common.
I'm like going through all of the staff members in my head, like who was it, what was it?
I remember sitting there, and there was 2 guys actually, and they're both friends, and one of them was basically talking about the way his strategy for like courting women is trying to make friends with them first, right?
But like how?
He wanted to go through the friend zone, and in my head I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
But also like how disrespectful to women. Like, I'm gonna pretend to be your friend just to like. It's mad.
It's disrespectful, full stop.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's...
Like, if I came on here and I was like, oh, I pretend to be friends with guys so that they'll take me out for free food.
No, and so, yeah, it's
the internet would go crazy.
It's very deceitful.
Yeah.
It's deceitful behaviour, right? And in some cases, it's seen as socially acceptable, and in some cases, it's not.
Yeah.
Even though, based on logic, it's just unacceptable to be deceitful. What tends to happen, I find, is when I end up having these conversations with other men, is it's maybe the first time someone's ever like not just gone like, yeah.
How do you get to like 30 plus years and no one's gone, dude, you sound like a dick?
Because
like, that is crazy.
Generally, and it is because it's generally considered okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not...
Makes me angry.
Coming from a place of judgment, I'm usually just coming from a place of logic where I'm like, doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
All right, because I'm well, not so much nowadays, but I was very innocent about the whole thing. So I'm just literally looking at everything from a surface level perspective. Again, you can make the argument, I'm on the spectrum, blah, 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 but whatever. I'm just like...
I'm on the spectrum, blah, blah, blah. I love it.
Taking everything
on my head.
Literally.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is to me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, you either like this person or you don't like this person, and you clearly do like this person. And if you want more from this person, you'd have to engage that conversation, but you're not going to, because deep down you know that this person doesn't feel the same way about you. It's almost torturous to continue engaging in a friendship with that person, knowing that their feelings aren't going to be reciprocated, in this weird hope that long-term familiarity is going to turn the tide on that.
Yeah.
And so, like, does it ever?
No. No, sometimes it does, but I think it's rare. Is it rare? Yeah, I think it's rare for people to be like, oh, we were friends for ages, and then... I don't know. I think that's such a strange concept to me of, like, investing in a friendship with the hope that it would change. Why can you not just enjoy it as a friendship? Like, if you truly cared about that person.
So I have female friendships, and I want to use that term in that specific way, because I can say I have female friends, or I can say I have female friendships.
Okay.
Right? And there's a reason why very few of my very close friends, or the friends that I would probably spend more time with, are women. And that's because there's always this potential line to cross. Now, I've ascertained, and that person's ascertained, that that's not a line that we're interested in crossing. And then there's other aspects to our relationship that allow us to interact in a friendly way. Fantastic. That doesn't exist with men. There is no line with me and another guy. So we can get as close as we want, right, without there being any possibility of anything sexual or romantic happening. And the reality is, it's just not entirely possible to create that when you've got this opposite thing.
It's really interesting. So when I was thinking about coming on here and like talking about the things that we were talking about, I was like thinking about all these interactions I had in the gym, and I was like getting really angry, and I was like, ugh. And then I was reminded of when I walked out the gym one time, and I was so like used to, being catcalled or like stuff happening, and I was so riled up on this particular day for whatever reason that I walked out the gym, and I had my headphones in, but like not very loud, so I could still hear some music, and I heard these two builders shouting and pointing, and I thought they were shouting at me. And I'm quite fiery. I don't know if that's been translated in the past 20 minutes or whatever, but I'm quite like, if I don't like something, I'm going to shout at it. I'm not really too particularly, scared of confrontation. So I thought they were talking about me. So I turn around and I absolutely lay into these guys. Like, I'm screaming at them. I'm like, why do you think you can talk to a woman? Blah, 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 blah. And they literally were like, miss, we were talking about the building site across the road. And they were so just like, oh, go away, you stupid woman. Like, obviously we're not, like, how, your ego is so big. You thought we were harassing you. We're talking about the building site. And I was so embarrassed. And I was like, why is my nature to assume that I'm being harassed? Why is that? Like,
well, it's quite normal for, if something has happened consistently, right, that we are then conditioned, our behavior is conditioned by the experiences that happen in our life.
yeah.
So your
Just humble them.
brain, right, is...
Maybe don't go in at 10. Check out the situation before.
Yeah, and that's a nice learning lesson for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
To kind of take a minute before you react,
Yeah.
which is probably a good idea in most situations.
Yeah, I'm learning that as I get older. That applies to everything.
But yeah, it's difficult for men and women to... they can never completely cross out. They can significantly reduce probability.
I think that's true for men. I think women often completely cross out the chance of anything romantic ever happening.
That's fair. Someone said this to me, and it's interesting. He basically told me something along the lines of, when men and women are friends, it's either because both of them are interested in each other, or at least one of them is interested in the other. They're very rarely ever friends, and one of them's not interested in the other.
I hate that. I hate that because I have loads of male friends, and I'm not interested in a single one of them.
You might not be, right?
But I don't want them to be interested in me. I want them to be
and they might not. Thing is, so you can't take it as this black and white thing, and you can't take it in a singular dimension. If one of your male friends is interested in you, their interest might equate to 2% of their total interest. Right, whereas the other 98% is, I would rather just be your friend.
But this is what I mean about the sexualization of women, because I can have 100% of a male friend, and my interest is just genuinely like their friendship. And yet, what you're saying to me is that the male interest is always somewhat sexual. There's always somewhat.
I mean, it's not in the way that you're thinking about it right now, because I can see where you've gone with it.
Okay.
I have women in my life, right, that, in all honesty, I don't really want to go there with them, right? I don't want there to be a sexual situation between me and this person.
Yeah.
But can I acknowledge that this woman is sexually attractive? Yes.
But that's what I mean. There's always there's always like a acknowledgement of like, this is what women are for.
Well, I don't. We're humans, right? And a lot of what we're driven by is our sort of primal instinct to recreate.
Yeah, I would argue that men are allowed to be more driven by that.
Both men and women are part of that equation. Men cannot recreate with other men. Women can't recreate with other women.
No, I know, but I feel like men are given permission to like overtly be driven by that.
So and so that bit is of the I guess the nature of this conversation right now is looking at that. But that aside, just at a physiological level, we are going to be driven towards each other. To that end, generally speaking, you might have, if there's 8 billion people, hundreds of millions might kind of like exclude themselves from it. But the majority are still going to kind of be like, well, if you're a woman, why are you interested in men, right? And if you're...
I don't know. Sorry.
Well, that's because if there is, by nature, we are kind of like physiologically and biologically drawn towards each other. So but we're not just entirely physiological beings, right? There's other aspects to us, and that's the bit that then starts to decide whether you want something or you don't want something. And the part of me that decides whether I want something with someone or not is that part.
Mm-hmm.
Another person who is tied in with the person that I just spoke about was also the person who taught me that you have, at any given moment in time, a base level of thinking, and you have the choice to think one layer above that, and it's the people that are able to think one layer above that that usually, well, his thing was more to do with how to be successful. So I got taught very early on to acknowledge their space, but to think outside of it. And I can't remember his exact words, but it's basically in the long lines of just having an elevated way of thinking.
Yeah, interesting.
Now, when I observe most men doing the staring, male bonding
I
kind
was
of,
just thinking, I was like, most men do not do this level of thinking.
it's not an elevated level of thinking, and that's probably why it
I
stands
don't know
out
if
to
it
me.
is though. Sometimes I'm like, you know what you're doing, and you're enjoying the fact that I'm uncomfortable.
That is a more sinister category of individual. I wouldn't say that that makes up the majority, but let's just talk.
No, but I think it's more common than you realise.
Let's just talk about that individual for a second, right? Because I have come across my fair share of predatory individuals. They're very covert. They're very. So I'm going to give my rendition of it. You tell me if I'm hitting the mark here. They're very charming. They're very likable. Generally, what I'm probably going to end up describing is somebody who is on the sort of narcissism spectrum. And most people would agree that this is a good person that everybody likes. But often they quietly do things behind closed doors and in public, and they are very calculated and clever with how they word things, and their body language, their tone.
Yeah.
And it resonates in how they leave a person feeling, and that's the only sign that you have that this person is like.
Yeah. I mean,
sinister.
like, so the gym that we worked at, there was one of those guys there, and it was a main reason in me leaving. And I remember we were sat like outside the office, and there was like a group of us, like some PTs and some like managers, and we were all chatting, and he made a comment about my boobs in front of everyone. And I remember looking round at literally everyone else being like, is no one picking up on this? Like, A, we're in a work setting, and B, this man is about to have a child with another woman. And no one said anything. A couple of the PTs laughed and whatever. And then when I raised it with my line manager, she was like, oh, yeah, God, man. I was like, no, misconduct in the workplace. And so, but because he was so charming, because he was so lovely, because he was everyone's mate, and he'd been there ages, and I was a newbie, and you know who it is from that smile, like, it was like, there was nothing I could do.
They do find it uncomfortable to interact with someone who's like very sort of, I don't want to use the word bluntly honest, but so for want of better words, very bluntly honest.
But they rely on the mask, right? Like that 100%, that is how he got away with making that comment about my body in a workplace, and not a single I think it was like 6 of us, not a single person. And I didn't feel like I could challenge him in the moment. And like now I would have done, but I was super young then, and I was like, so you're technically above me. And
I guess what we're talking about is how social politics
you're really going there.
keeps inappropriate male behavior protected.
Yeah. And it really is that. It really is that big, and it filters down into like the tiniest actions making women uncomfortable on the gym floor, in public, in the club. But it is that big of a picture. And I think that's why, again, when I was thinking about coming on here, I was like, how do I even bring this to one pinpoint? Because it is so socially acceptable.
I think when I thought about it in the context of if you took 10 guys, 5 of them are somewhat like unaware, right? And if you were to bring it to their attention, that they would be like, oh, well, I'm sorry. And be a bit more mindful about how they proceed forward. And I guess this is for those 5. Then there's 3 that kind of sit in the middle. They decide whether they are going to act appropriately or inappropriately depending on the company that they're in. So if they're with the original 5, or the 1 or 2 that are already kind of like quite wanting to be considerate and respectful, they're going to be like, yeah, no, that's of course not, mate. Whereas when they're now with our like final 2, who are just, they're just looking with their own agenda, then they'll kind of play along and they'll follow the leader a little bit. Everything seems to be a spectrum, and how people have been when they're in my company versus how they are when they're not in my company, and I'm very aware that it's different. And because of not wanting to be judged by me, they'll conduct themselves in a particular way. And because you're not conducting yourself in that way in front of me, then but I'm aware of who you are and how you're really thinking, and I have called that out quite a few times. Like,
that's the thing though, hey, like it's really hard as a woman if you experience something and you have, say something happens with a guy and you talk to one of his friends about it because you're like, we have a mutual friend, and the guy's initial response is, he's not like that. That is so frequent and so difficult because you're like, of course he's not around you because he doesn't need to be.
All right, here's what I'm going to do. For every guy that thinks that their mate is not like that,
they are.
I'm just gonna help you out.
They are.
If you don't want to listen to it from a woman, not only are they, but so are you.
Yeah.
And as a man, I know how my brain works. I know how my physiology works. It's my responsibility to manage myself and understand what situations, like as a personal trainer, one of the reasons I don't tend to work with a lot of women is because I'm not trying to be in that situation, and it happens a lot in reverse too. And
well, it's one of the reasons I don't train men, because it happens so much.
It's a very tricky. I've got a lot of female colleagues, and we almost every single time know that whenever they have a consultation with a guy, that 9 times out of 10, the guy was just trying to get their number.
I just feel like this needs to be put on billboards in Oxford Circus, that if you're going to a PT with the intention of trying to pull them, the PT knows, and either they're going to go for it, in which case that's their business and I wouldn't recommend doing it, or they know and they're not interested. So stop embarrassing yourself.
Women tend to know a lot. I have a lot of conversations with a lot of my female colleagues, female friends. I've been told so much stuff about what this guy has messaged, what this guy has done. Everything was noticed. Women never say anything, and I understand why. It's not safe for women to speak 99% of the time, but they do speak, and I've been told stuff about people that I see on a daily basis, that I have to have friendly interactions with, and again, I try and be quite unbiased, try and be objective. I try and have empathy because I am a guy as well, and I'm not going to solely judge a person based on a singular action.
Yeah, rightly so.
And I do understand that we've, as men, have never really been taught how to correctly gauge interest, how to correctly express interest, and so some people are kind of getting it right.
I do think I kind of let some men off the hook though.
What do you mean?
Just that, I don't know, you said it twice now, and I'm just, some of it I'm like, but have you? I don't know, there's just something about that phrase that makes me feel like I was in school, I was taught that if a guy bullied me, that was him showing interest. So what, as an adult woman, I'm meant to expect men? Like, I had to figure it out.
I heard that as well. Yeah. And to some extent, that's true. I would say so.
But that is nonsense. Why
It's
are boys allowed to do that?
It's a very immature approach, right? Which is why it's
Yeah, but why is it the girl's problem? Why is it not?
It's been a very long time since I've been in school. I don't know. I don't know if things have changed. I would like to see. I'd like to see social education occur in general.
Yeah.
Just because I've struggled massively understanding social interactions, and it's something I have had to become very self-taught on. Working as a personal trainer has helped me massively. Mm-hmm. If I had gone into like IT or accounting or something like that, I'd
insular bubble.
Yeah,
I guess that's why you get the insults though, hey?
Well, it's really challenging because no one's... This is going to sound bad now.
It's okay.
Should I say
We're there, go for it, say it.
I was saying earlier about how a lot of men don't get noticed, and fortunately or unfortunately, I wasn't one of those blokes.
As in, you did get noticed or you didn't?
I did get noticed.
Okay.
So without even wanting to, I naturally got opportunities to interact with the opposite sex. I got shown interest.
Okay.
I then, by default, you end up like being able to make friends with other men who also get shown interest. So to you, it's like quite normal that women would be interested in, because you're not only experiencing it yourself, like all your mates are also
right.
like,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
good looking guys or like just confident or whatever. And that's not to say that I've not interacted with people that aren't like not getting, like, they're not getting interest, but those guys, there is no natural opportunity. And so they get to 30 something, right? And there's times, and I've said this to you off camera, I work in a gym with extremely, like, an abundance of extremely beautiful women. And there's been times where I've had somebody come down and visit me, and they're literally just like completely lost in the environment.
Yeah.
They can't help but get distracted every 10 seconds.
Yeah.
I remember one guy, this years ago, and I was like, he had to come down. I had to like sit down and have a little consultation stuff with him. And one of the receptionists, right, who was quite attractive, and she just sort of said hello to me.
Just existed.
She just existed, basically, yeah. And then I was like, oh, hey, how's it going? And then he's just like, oh, there's girls here.
There's women in a public space.
And I was just like,
breathing?
Yeah, man. Yeah. You good? Yeah. All good. And so I was just trying to get on with whatever we were supposed to be talking about, but I could see he was just like completely lost by it.
Yeah.
And you forget that if you have been like quite exposed to an environment and you've been exposed to like being able to interact with the opposite sex, it's quite normal to you. You've been able to figure out what's interest, what's friendship, what's not interest.
Yeah.
And you've kind of gone through that, and I have had to go through that process, and I certainly have been a guy who mistook friendship for interest, and I certainly have been a guy that couldn't, like, there's a lot of women that showed interest, and I was like, at some point in time, because I was such an angry young person, I was like, how do you I'm not going to swear, what the like, in my head I'm like, the hell are you looking at?
But that's how women feel all the time.
It is something I've learned is probably not going to completely change. There is a biological nature to it. I do think it's worth having conversations because of those 5 guys out of the 10 that would kind of be like, it's cool, man. I mean, I am interested, but I don't mind if it's causing an uncomfortable environment. I'm happy to just mind my business and carry on. What do you, for anyone listening to this right now, what do you want to see change about the whole situation in an ideal scenario moving forward?
That's such a difficult question, because there is no one change, if that makes sense. The main deep change that would have to occur would have to be such a like societal flip of the way women are viewed, the way women are treated or expected to behave, the way women are perceived, that is such a monumental ask that that's never going to happen. On a like really surface level, if she's in the gym, just leave her alone. And if she's really fit and you're into her, wait for her to make the initial reaction.
So, Jimmy, where can people find you?
Yes, Jimmy Freeside _ on all platforms, Instagram, TikTok. There's also 2 Reddit pages about me on this subject.
I see.
Yeah, my followers are some interesting men. There's 2 Reddit pages about my titties.
Right, I see. So
Hence me feeling strongly about this subject.
Okay. Yeah, no.
Because my Instagram is not about my titties. Sorry. Well, it's a little bit bikini photos, but you know what I mean.
That's a whole different subject.
The wormies around.
Oh, I could definitely play devil's advocate there. But I'm probably...
No, to be fair, some of the screenshots that are on those Reddit pages, I look like trash. I'm like, guys, I do not look good here, but it's got to...
Again, I'll probably fill you more in on that. For the time. Yeah, how the male brain works.
But yeah, Instagram and TikTok, please.
But yeah, it's... thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Cathartic, to say the least.
You are definitely... I've kind of like watched and you talk a lot about this stuff, and you also like you make it very funny, I think, which is what makes it accessible.
You have to laugh about these things, otherwise it's too,
Yeah, I think if there's so much that we could talk about. I kind of just picked this sort of specific subject. So if you do go follow, you'll see like a bunch of like there's so many different aspects of the content that you post. Not many thirst traps these days, but
because the Reddit pages started coming out, and I was like, oh, maybe we should stop the thirst trapping. But one of the Reddit pages, the bio is like a place, literally says like a place to worship Jim without her feminist rhetoric.
Okay.
Like, literally, that's what it says.
It's interesting to see how involved people get.
Yeah, at least they acknowledge that I like preach about feminism.
Fair. You've gotten through to them.
Yeah, give it 2 years, it'll sink into the brain.
Exactly. But yeah, do feel free to like probably don't send weird DMs, guys, if that's all right.
I mean, you can. I will screenshot them and put them on my story, and we'll all have a laugh together.
But yeah, I've certainly enjoyed the more comedy elements of all the different things that you post, and I think we should probably like there's a lot more conversation to be had here. It's always kind of at this stage where I'm like, man, all these things to get into.
Yeah. It really just feels like the surface, doesn't it?
Yeah, you kind of just get through the surface. But yeah, we'll probably have Jimmy in again to talk about all these things. Otherwise, in the meantime, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll catch you next time.